Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to yet another installment of the NTC podcast. We're back with episode 108, sponsored by Sports Business Classroom. I'm Aaron Washington. Glad to be back with you guys for another episode. To my right, Avi Tiagi, co-host. Always good to have you on the pod, man. It's been an interesting few weeks around the league, and I think it's been a little bit of time since we recorded. It might have been 10 days or so, a little
Yeah,
bit longer than usual for us, but we had to take some time to get some things together, get on the right page as far as our health goes, and monitor the league and let things kind of happen and unfold. And then we figured it was a good time to get back on the pod. So Avi, glad to have you back on. This is going to be a fun pod, and I am not looking forward to the latter half of it. It's going to be it's going to be rough, but it's still going to be a good time. So glad to have you back on.
I don't know what's more rough, allergy season or trying to pick these teams, man. I mean,
Oh, that's a toss up. I'm still
it's
struggling with it right now with the
yeah, I
allergy.
know.
So that's
Um,
a good question.
it's brutal.
Both are bad. But before we get to what is probably going to be a slightly controversial part of the pod, we're going to start off with All NBA first team. So the subject of our pod today is going to be twofold. It's going to be All NBA. We're going to hash out our teams, see where we stand in that regard. And then towards the latter half of the pod, the second half of the pod, we're going to get into a little bit of Milwaukee Bucks news here. And we're going to look at how they've been performing over the last few games. And it's not been good. It has not been good. So that'll be interesting. They do play tonight. As of this recording, they have a game on tap. They're playing the New York Knicks. So we're going to see how that goes. And hopefully they can break out of this slump because this is the worst time to go cold if you're Milwaukee. They got to snap out of this.
It might be the worst slump I've ever seen by a contending team. I mean, a three-game slump like this against three bona fide complete tankers.
Man,
Oh
it
man,
doesn't get any
I
worse than
can't
that.
remember a more rough three-game stretch than this.
I can't either, honestly. It's that bad. That's coming soon, guys. To start things off here, like I said, we're going to discuss All NBA. So we're going to get things started with first team All NBA. And this is the cream of the crop. We're looking at the very best the NBA has to offer. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start throwing out some names here. Avi, you can chime in. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of similar thoughts here. These guys are just that good. I don't want to take too much time on this because these guys, their game speaks for itself. Many of these guys are in the MVP conversation. Their
Yep.
numbers are absolutely magnificent. So, I mean, we might have a couple of differences here, but overall, I mean, few guys on this team are like locks. There's no debate here. So
Yeah.
let's start off with one name here that we've been talking about quite a bit on this podcast over the last several months, even before the season started. I jumped on with Brett Usher, who was our guest a few weeks ago, and we talked about this player in particular and this team. And then we just continued the talk as the season has progressed, talking about Chet, talking about Jalen Williams, talking about this guy right here, Shea Gilgeous Alexander. I don't know what else to say about him other than he's just one of the most solid, consistent, just incredibly skilled players in the NBA. Before this stretch here, where he's missed some games with a hip issue, I think it is, and then the Thunder have suffered a few losses. Before that, he was playing almost every game. He was playing every game. He was scoring 30 plus every game. And oddly enough, he was scoring exactly 31 points. It seemed like every other game. I don't know what that's
Yeah.
about. He just loves 31 for some reason. But I mean, Shea has been one of my favorite players for years. This season has been no different. He's been very active defensively, great hands, gets a lot of deflections, a lot of steals. He comes back on the offensive end. He runs the offense. He's one of the very best at getting to the rim, finishing at the rim. His footwork is impeccable. His handle is incredible. And his creativity on the court as well. He does a lot of moves that you don't see from other players. He's so good at just reading the floor, reacting accordingly, keeping his teammates involved. There's almost no way to stop him when he's on. Just with the way he uses his body and gets his shot off, there's not much you can do. 30 points a game this season, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, about 53% from the field, 36% from 3, 87 from the line. So SGA is just magical. I don't know what else to say other than I love his game. And the Thunder are going to be an absolute terror in the playoffs because Shea is that guy. He's that deadly. So, thoughts on Shea? I don't know if there's anything else to add, but what you got, man?
Uh, I mean, what more is there to say about the campaign he's had? I mean, OKC leads the league in drives per game as a team at 62.3, which is six more than anybody else. The Pacers would be second. And I mean, he's kind of the head of the snake there, and he's been that way for years. He's led the league in drives per game for 4 years in a row. That's kind of what his game is built off of. The ability and audacity he has sometimes to just slither through a bunch of defenders. Someone might be stunning at him, doesn't matter. Sneak right through. His handle is magnificent, and yet his passing has also subtly improved the last few years. I don't yet consider him an elite passer, but over time, I think he's gotten better at being able to um, acknowledge when defenders are coming at him and kind of find the open man spacing. And with the 5-out spacing that OKC tends to run, there's almost always someone open as people converge on him. So, I mean, it's just, he's fantastic. The team, I think, has amplified his strengths. Off ball, I actually like the work he does more than some of the other people we're going to mention on this All NBA first team. Like, I feel like this is a player who has completely maximized his talent in almost every way. Defensively, he's not a stopper. It doesn't matter. What his strengths are, he maximizes them. He's got length. He's got the ability to be able to kind of sneak his hand into the cookie jar without getting caught. He's very he seems like someone who pays attention to the scouting report. He has a good sense of what players' moves are, where they want to make the passes. So just based off of timing and knowledge, he's able to generate so many deflections per game. He's generating 5 deflections per 48 minutes. He's just a complete player. I mean, off ball, you don't see superstars like him, other than Steph, really. You don't see superstars set screens as guards the way he does. He's he just does everything you want from a winning player.
That's a great explanation of Shea's game. He whatever you need from him, he's got it. He's clutch. He's not afraid of the big moment. That's just another feather in his cap. When it comes to playoff
Yeah.
time, I can't wait to see playoff Shea. Now we've seen him in the playoffs before with the Clippers, and he did quite well in that role. But as the guy now with the Thunder, it's going to be a different story for him compared to that last time. But he's going to be just as deadly, I believe, because there's not really any good way to stop him. He has the outside shot going. He shoots, I mean, about league average, but considering his shot volume and the difficulty, pretty solid mark from there. Like I said, 36%. So that's Shea in a nutshell. He does everything. He's a
Yeah.
destroyer of worlds. There's no really good defensive coverage for him. I mean, if we're talking about guys that absolutely wreck opposing teams and just leave them speechless, we have to talk about Luka Doncic. I mean, he's the next natural guy to bring up in this conversation. Uh, 33, just shy of 34 points per game. Incredible. He's almost averaging a triple double, 9 rebounds, 9 assists. And the key for Luka, I think what's kind of brought him to another level. Well, I think one leads to another. The 3-point shot is
Yeah.
improved for him. His accuracy is improved. I think part of that is because he came into the season in shape, ready to play. Uh, he was playing through the summer last year. He played right up into the beginning of this season, last fall. And I think his energy has been better. His stamina has been better. He doesn't wear down as easily. And now you have a guy that's taking so many step backs. You get shades of James Harden when he was taking like loads and loads of step back jumpers, but he maintains a good percentage on that. When you couple those two together, a shot to where you can't block it, you're not really going to get a great contest a lot of the time. And he's draining a lot of these shots. He's made the most step back jumpers in the league. He's shooting 38% from 3 overall. It just adds another dimension to it. Is already a deadly player. And of course, you have the passing, one of the most creative and just outright impressive passers in the league. He has a lot of size. So when you factor that into the equation, I mean, there's not much you can do when he gets to the rim. It's similar to someone like Brunson or SGA, to where they get in the paint. It's like their footwork is so impeccable to where they can create something out of nothing. To where most players are going to have a turnover or a bad shot. It's like, hey, I'm going to make something happen. I'm all good. I'm not flustered. So for Luka and the Mavs, they're having a really great season so far. I think they're going to be a beast in the playoffs. His synergy with PJ, Washington, and Gafford, we spoke about this in
Yeah.
the prior pod. It has been really on point. It's brought them to another level in the NBA. So I think all around, I think like Luka is rising the ranks. He is officially now in the conversation for I think best player in the NBA, just because offensively he's just so well rounded at this point. He doesn't really have any holes offensively in his game. He can do it all. So you can nitpick and say like he's not the best defender or things like that. It's like I mean, okay, sure, but still 6'7", 230. I mean, he can hold his own in the post, and he's probably gonna get cooked on the perimeter a lot of the time. But
Yeah.
as long as he's in the right defensive coverage and he's engaged, you can get by with him on defense. So, I mean, Luka, what else is there to say? He's just Luka Magic, Luka Wonder. He's throwing up trick shots before the game, bouncing it off the jumbotron and back into the rim. Like he's
He's
different,
crazy.
man. He's unstoppable.
Yeah, there's he leaves me speechless, honestly. I mean, even earlier today, actually, at the time we're recording, the Rockets played the Mavs, and it was just the Rockets are switching. They're covering up almost um every passing option he has. Dylan Brooks or Amen Thompson are guarding it at all times. Even when they switch, none of the matchups are particularly favorable. Jalen Green is there. So even they were able to force Doncic into an unusual 7 turnovers, and he still beats them in overtime. Is absolutely deadly. Almost anytime he's on ball, the you can almost see the fear in the Houston Rockets because they realize the orchestrator, the conductor of that offense has the ball on ball, and anything is possible here. This year he's shooting 39% on above the break threes, which is just absurd because again, it's since he is such an on-ball creator, he doesn't even get that steady diet of corner three-pointers that'll boost your percentage. He's taking some of the most difficult three-pointers that exist, and he's just canning them repeatedly, running into them, step backs, pull up middies. His pull up midi game is actually better than I think than it used to be. And then when it comes to being a driver, he's probably second only to Shea, in my opinion, as a driver. And he has some fantastic moves near the rim. His creativity really strikes out near the rim. Whereas with Shea, I feel like I appreciate his creativity more in terms of the way he's able to slither through openings. With Doncic, it feels like he's excellent at using his body to kind of muscle his way through an opening. But then the real magic is to see what type of finish he's going to end up doing. I think my personal favorite is the one where he starts the Euro, but he ends up starting it a beat later than you'd expect. So once he has planted his right foot, everyone thinks, oh, that's his second step and goes for the jump, and he still has one left. And then he just does a little left reverse, and everybody's left just scratching their heads confused. He's just a phenomenal player. Off ball is maybe the place where I would still. That's the thing. He's maybe the most talented player in the league. He's probably top 3 right now. I would say in MVP voting, if you had to ask me. And I
Yeah,
still think there's a lot of room for him to improve. Defensively,
scary.
defensively, he is what he is. I mean, I think with even more conditioning, if he really trained himself, I feel like he could become much more of a menace even defensively, just because of what his size allows him to do. I feel like when he's extremely motivated, I think he could move around a little bit more defensively laterally and maybe not get, blown by as easily. And then offensively, to me at least when I watch, Luka without the ball and Luka versus the ball are almost a completely different person. In that sense, it really does remind me of Harden, where when Luka doesn't have the ball, there is a lot of standing around, and even if he's standing around the wing, he doesn't tend to slide down or move around too much. It's kind of like, okay, I'm planted here, and Kyrie, you kind of go do what you're doing. Thinking basketball kind of made a great video about this recently about Luka Doncic and why maybe his plus minus numbers historically don't always match up with what we're seeing on the court. Some of it is, I think some of it is sample, some of it is maybe a little bit of noise and who your teammates are around you and who your backup point guards are. But some of it I really do think is that the way he plays, if you surround him with an excellent ball handler, there is a little bit of that your turn, my turn feeling. He doesn't mesh as well maybe right now with other stars. And that's the scary
Right.
thing. Because he's a top 3 MVP guy like this right now. If 3 years down the line he continues to improve. I mean, after all, his 3-point shot has improved, his conditioning has improved. If he keeps continuing to improve, I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is. Is the ceiling just greatest offensive player in the league history? Maybe like could he be in contention for that? I don't know. It's possible.
It's
His
possible, yeah.
passing is his passing is maybe second only to Jokic, right? His scoring package in Arsenal, especially now with the 3-point shot, is it second to anyone? I mean, on ball at least, is
Good question.
he's a complete player.
He is. He does it all, man. He really does it all. You brought up Jokic there in the conversation. Obviously, he's another guy on this team. Uh, the Joker is just doing otherworldly things. I want to get to some of these other teams and other players that are more kind of question marks. So I'll just cover Jokic in general by saying arguably the best passer in the league today. Force inside, shooting 34% from three. I mean, that's maybe a little bit down this season, but still 57%. It's just crazy how he's had a couple of dips this season to where his numbers aren't what we usually expect from him. And he's still, overall numbers are incredible, almost averaging a triple double. He has those 9 assists. Away from that, he still could end up with another MVP award. That's how high he set the bar last season. He comes in this season like maybe he's like 2% worse, but he's
Yeah.
still just outright one of the best players in the league. So shout out to Jokic and just leading the Nuggets again. I mean, they're definitely in the hunt for another championship. A little more question marks this season as far as the bench, but I mean, they're still going to be an absolute beast. And when they're all clicking together, that's a veteran unit that knows how to win. So I mean, you can never count them out. So that's 4 of the 5. I'll go ahead and give you my 5th. You might have something different, but I couldn't leave him off this team. LeBron James takes the 5th spot for me on first team.
Wait, so who are
So
your 5?
SGA, Luka, Giannis,
Okay,
Jokic,
Giannis. Okay.
LeBron. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, for me, it's crazy to think that at 39, pushing 40 years old in almost a year, he's found a way to expand his game again. He's still taking over 5 threes a game, and now he's upped his percentage to 41% from three. So you add that in with his usual efficiency from inside the arc, getting to the rim. He's finishing about the same rate as last year. I think his 2-point percentage is almost identical. Just still has the passing acumen, still has the ability to just create plays for his teammates, be a great scorer, all around scorer, still averaging 25 points a game for the 19th straight year.
Huh.
Doesn't even sound real. It sounds like something I pulled from 2K. Uh, 25 points a game once again. Just okay, yeah, you can nitpick and say like he's not the defender he used to be, but I mean you can kind of nitpick about almost every player on this team about like what they're doing on defense here. So uh still just an incredible player, still getting up above the rim, still a credible top threat, still a wrecking ball in transition, one man fast break. All the things he's always done. He just adds another layer with the 3-point shot. Like I said, shooting over 40%, which I never would have thought that at this volume he'd shoot 40%. He shot 40% in Miami, but he was not taking the same volume of threes as he is today. It's a little bit different. So I just looked at put that all together, and I couldn't leave him off. There's other great candidates for this spot. I mean, you can put Tatum in there, you can put Katie in there. This is going to be a theme. Like, there's so many spots that are up in the air, and it really just comes down to personal preference. I don't think there's a lot of wrong answers on this front. So LeBron for the 4th spot, Giannis for the 5th spot. Giannis is Giannis, man. I got a number here for his rim percentage: 78% at the rim, 95th percentile for the entire
Oh my
league.
God.
Mind-boggling numbers. Still averaging 11 assists, 11 rebounds,
Yeah.
6 assists. Now, yeah, okay, 27% from three, 65% free throw. We don't care about that. The 10
We know what
second
he is. We know what he
10
is.
violations, yeah, we don't care. He is a monster. Defensively, still gives fits, especially when he can play a little bit more off ball than on ball with the length and anticipation. I just wanted to quickly kind of shout those guys out because, I mean, they're doing incredible things. Giannis is another lock, but let me know who you have for your 5th player if it's not LeBron James. Who are you thinking for that spot?
Before we get to that, just wanted to say 3 things. One, I think I could make a claim that Jokic is actually better this season than last season. He's just not as hot in terms of his perimeter shooting. Last year, he was shooting 38% and he was shooting above 50% from mid range. This year, that's kind of fallen down to like right below 50%, around like 47, 48% from mid range and 34% from three. And I think just those efficiency numbers are kind of what makes it look like, hey, he's not as efficient as he was before. But I think last year, he was just, I mean, he was crazy hot. His hook shot percentage last year was like, if I'm going off of memory here, I think it was above 70%. Like some of these numbers were just his touch was completely absurd from all ranges. He was above 70% as true shooting, and a lot of it just felt like this was. I don't know how he didn't win MVP. Honestly, it was a phenomenal year. Like from everywhere, he was just completely on fire, and it might have just been like a once in a generation. Like every shot I take, I'm probably gonna make. So I just feel like as a player now, I feel like his passes are even more impressive now this year than they were last year. I feel like he's even better in terms of being a hub of the offense. You know, he has more chemistry with his teammates, so he's less turnovers. He has a better sense of, okay, here's when I should make the outlet. Here's where the guy's open. He has his chemistry with Aaron Gordon just improves every year. So there's even fewer turnovers than there would have been in the past in terms of, oh, okay, I know he's got his man on his left, so I'm gonna pass it to his right, or vice versa. Like he continues to improve. It's just not always going to show itself because some of it just comes down to, hey, are you hitting an absurd amount of shots today or not? So, my second point, Giannis is kind of like an Oreo, right? He's kind of like an Oreo cookie. Like you know what it is, but what he is great. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, yeah, you'd love if you had your Oreo with like milk or something, but like, hey, man, it's still an Oreo. You
It's
you
still
still enjoy
amazing
it, right?
for sure.
Third thing, listening to you talk to LeBron almost made me start chuckling out loud and interrupting you because when you started going into what LeBron was doing, it reminded me a lot of like that Dre and Snoop verse. You know what I'm talking about? You know that song by
Uh,
Dre and Snoop, like the old one. What's his name now? I'm forgetting now.
you might have to break it down for me, man. I'm not sure. I'm following.
Because
But
like, I forgot. It's like midway through the chorus, he keeps saying "still," and then he keeps. I think it's from. Is it still Dre? I can't even remember. It's too old. Anyways, you what you said about LeBron, I mean, what more is there to add? Right? I mean,
he's been doing it since the dawn of time. I mean, it's same. Nothing's new under the sun, I guess.
there's nothing to say. I didn't actually have him on my first team though. I had a different candidate. I had Kawhi.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah, I had Kawhi Leonard. I just
okay.
thought his defense was better. I think it takes a lot to be able to kind of sustain your usage your load as an offensive player, despite being next to two other elite level ball handlers in terms of Harden and Paul George. So while passing has never been his strength, I still think the fact that he can create so many shots on that team, he is their primary driver. He is kind of the primary scorer as well. Like he takes almost all of the hardest matchups, and defensively, he's still a force as a two-way wing. I think this year, the fact that he's finally been able to play above that games limit, to me, I just thought that his two-way play to me, and the fact that he can offer so much as a spacer as well. He's shooting 42% from three. It's just the full combination to me. I thought was enough where I would just have him on my first team.
That's fair. 68 games played as of today. He missed today's game
Yeah,
with the Cavaliers, but 68 games, man, that's really impressive. You love to see it. He hasn't played 65 games since San Antonio, I believe. So that is awesome to see.
you want to know when was the last time he played 65 in a regular season?
Wasn't it 20 I know it's one of those San Antonio years, like 17 or something
Yep,
like that?
2016, 2017.
Okay,
Yep,
okay, yeah.
yep.
I thought
So
so.
we're
But I
going
think
back
we talked
very
about
far.
that's a long time, man. I mean, we're talking about 7 years. That's
Yep.
a long time in the NBA. Long time.
25-year-old Kawhi.
Wow. That's incredible. But that's an awesome story. I love to see that
Yeah, I
from
love
him.
it
So
too.
I have Kawhi on a different team. But so I'll bring up here in a little bit. I don't
Okay.
have him on my first team, but he's on all NBA for sure for me. So let's move on here to second team All NBA. So this is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult as far as who we have. So going to change up the format on this a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and give my five. I might give a little blurbs about a few players, and then I hand it off to you. You can give your five and kind of justify maybe a few of those choices. So starting off with Jalen Brunson is my first pick for second team All NBA.
Okay.
Uh, Devin Booker is my second. Jason Tatum is my third. Kevin Durant is the fourth, and AD Anthony, no longer day to day Davis, is my fifth in all NBA second team. uh, I'll start with AD. I actually considered him for first team. I considered it.
Okay.
He's played 73 games, which if you told me before the season started AD would play 73 games,
That's
I
crazy,
would
man.
never believe it. I'd be like, no way he's playing 73. And he could
Are we
actually
sure
get
that's
it.
not a typo?
What's that?
Are we sure that's not a typo?
Right. Like I looked
I'm
at it, I was
looking at
like,
the stats and it still seems like a typo.
it does. I mean, there's still a few more games left, so he can actually end up at 77, I want to say, if he plays the rest of the games left in the schedule. Like, that blows my mind. I never would have thought. So 73 games played as of today, April 7th, 24 points a game, 12 boards a game, three assists, 55% from two, and then you have the defense. So
Yeah.
you pair the incredible offensive production to where some nights he's absolutely dominant in the post to the extent of like of a Giannis, to where like he starts to assert himself down low. He gets super aggressive. He's getting every rebound. He's getting all these putback dunks, and there's nothing the other team can do to stop it. Like that's what kind of separates those players from even
Mhm.
another tier or two down. Those guys cannot be stopped. When they're in a rhythm, the only way to stop them is to literally foul the crap out of them. Like I can't think of any other way to slow them down. But the elite rim protection he's always had, the ability to be a pretty effective switch defender in certain situations, just the ability to be dominant on offense and then also be locked down on defense. I don't have exactly what he's held his opponents to at the rim, but I'm sure it's a very low number, probably top 10 in the league as far as opponent rim field goal percentage. So you pair all that together, and I just came out saying, like, okay, I can't quite get to first, but I will definitely put him on second because I think he's been, believe it or not, a model of consistency for the Lakers through all their ups and downs. Now, I know it's crazy to say,
It's so
but
crazy to say, man. I can't believe that. I can't
wild.
believe it.
But through all the ups and downs, Lakers season has been a roller coaster, and he's been the
Yeah.
constant every single game. I like to reward consistency, durability, things like that. Those are two of the factors in this that I rank very highly because it's the same story with someone like Shea,
Yeah.
Brunson. Like these guys always show up. Jalen Brunson, 28 points a game. Like, wow. For a guy that's 5'10, maybe somewhere in that range, 5'11, averaging 28 a game on almost 40% from three on high volume with no Randall for what, a third of the season, something like that. Having to assume an even greater load, more defenses are loading up on him, and he hasn't really missed a beat through all of it. A lot of injuries for the Knicks, maintaining a top 5 seed in the East. I think he should have been an all-star starter personally over Dame even back then. Just absolutely incredible. I think he's slightly down as far as the like the short mid percentage. I think like last year he was a little bit better as far as the short mid around the rim, but this season he's
More
boosted
volume.
point
Yeah.
percentage. So it's actually worked out better in his favor as far as that goes. And then the other three, I mean, Booker, Tatum, Katie, I mean, these guys, like they do what they do, but I think with Booker just taking another step forward as far as the playmaking, being a point guard for this team, averaging 7 assists, maintaining efficiency, 37% from three, also assuming a huge scoring load, 27 points a game, doing whatever the team needs through all the injuries, through all the shifting roles. He's just maintained his level of play through it all. Explosive, one of the most explosive scorers in the league. So that's why I have him in there. And then Tatum and KD. I mean, they do what they do, especially with KD. It's kind of the same thing with LeBron. Same thing for many years. So that's what I have so far. That's what I have. Period for my second team. I'm curious to hear what you got, Avi. Any differences there in that five for the second team?
I mean, it's mostly pretty similar, right? I mean, if we think about it, because I had Kawhi on my first team, I ended up with LeBron on my second team. So we've already covered LeBron. I had Booker, I had Tatum, I had Durant as well, right? So just a quick blurb on those three. Even when I watch the Suns offense, and especially in the fourth quarter, it feels like they get stale a lot. The fact that they've even been able to win as many games as they have, I think, is a testament to Booker and Kevin Durant and their ability as shot creators and to be able to support the load that they are without a true point guard, especially for Booker. I mean, he is someone who has significantly grown his ability to be able to make those passes, uh, read the court, be able to kind of pass his way out of double teams, then go back and get the ball and kind of make shots out of it. He's had another efficient shot creation and shot making season. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant, offensively, what is there to say? I mean, how many years is it now that he's been averaging over 20 points per game? He too is like just a model of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the thing is, actually, I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy watching Tatum until I just started really watching all the film of Tatum,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just phenomenal. Especially because I watched him right after I watched Durant, and I was like, I'm sorry, am I just watching the same thing again? Like, is this on a loop? What's going on here? Like
Mm-hmm.
his game has grown so much. Even in years past, I felt like there were times when you kind of wanted him to attack with his left, just because you're not quite sure what sort of shot he's going to get into, especially if you're able to cover up his step back. But now it just feels like his handle it improves year over year. He's a better shot maker than he was in years past. He can handle more as a driver and as a passer than he could before. Like there are more reads he can take on, which is kind of useful now because especially since they traded Smart, there's even more of an onus on him to become more of that ball handler and distributor. Derek White, I love him, but he can only handle so much. And the way they've been using Drew Holiday kind of as the fifth starter means he's not really replacing what Marcus Smart was. So the onus has been on him and Jalen Brown to be more of those shot makers and shot creators. And I think he's really stepped up to the plate. I think this is his best true shooting season as a star, right? So it's just he's a great player. And then my fifth spot, I still have Steph. I'm just not ready to quit. I'm just not ready to quit.
I can't hate on him, man. I can't. Like,
And we know what Steph is. I don't know how many blurbs I need to say. He's having a down year, and especially since the All Star break, actually, it's been a severe downturn. So I can see based off of that if he kind of gets relegated, but just on the merits of the entirety of his play, what he still does as a as a gravity. I mean, he provides high gravity
yeah,
and he does it in a
always.
way that I think nobody else still can. Right, like even
Mm-hmm.
someone like Lillard, it would be helpful if someone like Lillard could provide more of that off-ball shooting. But the way Lillard kind of goes into a shot, it kind of limits him. Same with someone like Brunson. Steph still has that automatic release, and the way he sets up his shot as well is a little bit more fluid. So it's just I still have him there, but I can easily see the case for someone being like, hey, based off the downturn he's had, maybe this is too much. But
Yeah, I mean, I'll spoil it a little bit. I slid him to third for
yeah,
me.
I got you.
Yeah, but I mean, I couldn't take him off for the reasons you mentioned. He is still one of the best off-ball players in the NBA. He still commands a ton of attention. He's still averaging 26. He's still shooting 40 from three.
Yeah, exactly.
Still
That's
shooting
right.
90 from the free throw line. I mean, like, okay, Curry, a slightly worse version of Curry, is still an incredible offensive player. Okay, yeah, he's not MVP level anymore. We get that.
Yep.
But his impact on the basketball court is still incredible. He is still a way better finisher than I think anybody could have imagined. Just the ability to just be a creative force inside. And he had a shot the other day, just a couple of games ago, to where he just kind of, I think it was the Rockets game. He just kind of
Yeah.
one of
Him and
these.
Kyrie, man, they're the best finishers. They are the
Yeah,
best guard finishers I can think of. They might be the best finishers in general when you consider the difficulty and the fact that they don't have the
yeah,
height advantage. And so much of their finishing does come down to creative finishes with the left or the right. Whatever the angle their body's facing, they can kind of find a way to orient it into a shot that they're comfortable with. It might not be a sort of layup that most people are comfortable with, but they've practiced and gone those reps so many times. And even mentally, when they're going to the hoop, they are so creative. It's the way we're talking about with Doncic, but even Doncic doesn't need to employ those sort of tricks of the trade as much, just because of his size and the fact that the height does matter. So he's still an incredible finisher. This is the first year I think since this really is the first year, other than that five games he played in 2019-20. This is the first year since 2014-15 where I feel like he is firmly out of his prime. And again, he's still averaging 26 points per game, 5 assists on 50-40-90 splits. Like, nice.
It's still insane, man. Like he's still an incredible player. So yeah, definitely want to give him credit. And I mean, he can still go into one of those old school heaters to where I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls another like a 40 or 50 point game like he did last year, that game 7 against the Kings, to where he just absolutely catches fire.
Yeah,
He's still capable of that. So you
yeah,
just factor that in and his ability to take over a game. He still has that takeover, uh, that uncanny ability to just take over when the game demands it. So I think all that together, he's still an All NBA player, not first team and not a
yeah.
superstar maybe, but he's still one of the best.
Because when I say 50-40-90 in this case, I mean 50% on 2 point percentage. And
Twos, yeah,
the reason it's even like that, I think he's what I've seen from Steph is it's not the way he's kind of lost ground is kind of in the smaller things. It's harder for him to get to the rim than I think it's ever been. In 2021-22, he was really good at the start of the year, and then he after the Marcus Smart injury, it kind of like, um, I mean, even in 2021-22, after he tried to go for the record where he was trying to get 15 threes against Portland, from that point forward, he had started tailing off, and then when he got injured against Smart, um, that kind of torpedo his season. But other than that season, this is the lowest amount of 2 pointers he's taken in the last 4 or 5 years. So a part of that is because he's having more trouble getting to the rim than ever. He's only taking 7.5% of his shots at the rim, which would be the lowest he's had ever. And a lot of that is because as he's getting older, it is getting a little bit harder for him to get into the heart of the paint. And then on top of that, because he's having to compensate so much for the rest of his teammates and the fact that lineups are always fluctuating, there are a lot of lineups these days where I don't know why they've thrown out some of these two shooters, three non-spacer lineups. With all that pressure on him, I feel like this is also arguably his worst defensive season since, if I go off the top, maybe 2014-15 when he was still small and scrawny. But now it's just because his mobility is compromised and a lot of the times he looks really tired. So that's kind of part of the reason why this is a down year for him. But again, I still
yeah,
think he's a phenomenal player. And part of the reason I was thinking about it is if you were to tell me one of these players between him and some of the third team guys was going to win you a series, I still think it would be him.
yeah. No, that's the thing. Like he still has that ability to be the best player in the series
Yeah.
if it comes down to it. So yeah, Curry is still a special player. So I mean, yeah, the second team pretty crazy. I think this is where it gets interesting though.
Oh
Now that
man,
we're sliding into third team,
I think we
this
need to
is
talk through
where
this one together. I think we need to actually talk through this together.
we
Together,
we
we
do.
need to like decide how we're gonna do this because
Let's
this
do
is
it.
a really tough one.
It
So
is.
let's just each toss out a name and then see what the other person thinks about it, and then we just go
All
from there.
right. That's a bet. All right. Give me your first third team pick.
Paul George, he's my first guy in. He was the only guy where I felt like, okay, I have him in, and I feel good about this because I did not feel good about anybody else.
We talked about it before the pod. I mean,
Yep,
I had him in until maybe yesterday, and
yep.
then I slid him out. But of course, he goes out here today, makes me look terrible.
That
He
game
had
winner was filthy, man. That game winner was nasty.
he absolutely cooked the Cavs in that
Oh
fourth
my god.
quarter, and made me look.
Mobley's still looking for his knees, man.
He is. He absolutely got dropped off on that
Oh,
snatchback. Now, Paul George is incredible. He's super efficient this season. His ability to just be one of those deadly off ball players
yeah,
that just come off the screens. He can be on and off ball. He can toggle at a moment's notice. I think that versatility for him has been one of the keys for the Clippers being so impressive this season. Yeah, they had a little bit of a dip there. I think a couple weeks ago they lost some games. They fell out of the race for first in the West. But I mean, still, like we saw it today, he can still demonstrate those flashes of quote unquote prime Paul George, where he was in like OKC to where like, hey,
yeah,
I can carry this team. No Kawhi. He recognized that there was need for him to be more aggressive as a scorer, and he went out there and basically won the game for them. He had a nice block on the other end, left-handed block when the Cavs were trying to, I think, tie the game. So no, I don't blame you at all for having him on third team. I had him on third team, until the last minute.
What
So,
pushed him off?
that's a great question, man. I thought about what his role on the team compared to some of the other players I have on third,
Yeah.
to where like, okay, he's not the central guy. Like if Kawhi is playing and Harden is playing,
Yep.
he's not the focal point like a Tatum, like a KD, LeBron, to where everything goes through him and his imprint on the game is that big. I
Yeah.
guess like there's some games to where he kind of flows into more of like he's not a role player, but
No, I know
sometimes
what you mean because they
role
don't let him. They don't give him those passing responsibilities, and they don't really depend on him as a driver either. That
right.
responsibility kind of goes to Kawhi. So there
Yeah.
are times when
Yeah.
you feel like you're watching a super role player, and it's
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
yep. I had the same experience as well. It's actually part of the reason why when we were doing all those All-Star conversations and stuff, like in February as well, that same sort of discussion is part of the reason why I think I was, um, if I'm being honest, maybe unfairly punishing him because there is a feeling when you're watching him, and especially when you're watching a Clippers game as a whole, of being
Mhm.
like, okay, he feels like a third option a lot of times on this team, and it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like he's having to shoulder as much of a load as a driver and as a shot creator. So
Mhm.
there is an inkling of like, okay, maybe I don't I shouldn't value this as much. But then I was starting to think of it from the flip side as well. And then a part of that came to me as I was watching his highlights was how many people do you trust to fill the role that he's filling?
There aren't many. There aren't many that can do what he does as effectively as he does.
Yeah,
So in
because
that
that
sense,
was what I was thinking as well. When I'm
yeah.
watching him, it's different from watching Tatum or Durant, right? Because when you watch Tatum or Durant, you're watching someone now who is at the stage of their career. Tatum's entering it, Durant's leaving it, where you can kind of they can support an offense onto themselves, and
Mhm.
you can kind of depend on them. Okay, they will be my pull-up shot creator. I'll depend on them for some passing. I'll depend on them for um, drives as a team, which is very valuable, especially as the uh, pace and space. We're now focusing on space has already been kind of adapted to the league, and now it's all about the pace. And part of pace is these mini transitions. A drive is basically like a mini transition where you're just running towards the hoop, the defense is collapsing, and now you're getting an opportunity to pass it out straight out to shooters. And
Right.
because he doesn't seem like a player at the moment who is going to end up doing that. But within the role he's in, I think of all the forwards I was considering, I think he might be the best defender
Mm.
because
Yeah.
I trust him. Edwards is a good defender, but he's not as active in the passing lanes as Paul George is.
Yeah,
Kawhi
agreed.
is really good, but I don't think I want Kawhi in a perimeter player at this stage of his career. I just think sometimes his mobility isn't what it used to be when he was younger.
Yeah.
LeBron, he's just older. When he's
Yeah.
playing at like full enthusiasm, it's like, oh, okay, this is still LeBron. But because
Mhm.
he's older, when you're watching full games, it feels like he can't sustain it for long stretches. And Tatum to me is a good defender, but he's just kind of never been that. And Durant is
Yeah.
a good defender, and he's a good secondary shot blocker. But
Underrated. I think he's
yeah,
underrated.
underrated. It's underrated.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason all those Warriors lineups, the death lineup used to work as well, because there could be times you just slot him in as a five and it works. The Suns
Mhm.
have been overusing it, in my opinion, but it's partially because of how their roster is constructed. So he's maybe the most comparable to me, but I think 1 through 5, if I had to ask someone to actually try to defend, I think Paul George is maybe the guy I would ask right now. And so I just kind of thought of, okay, his 3 point shooting is elite. I love his pull up game. It feels like he ages like fine wine. And defensively,
Mhm.
if I think he's the best forward, how can I not? So I ended up sticking on my
Yeah.
13.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think there's a case to be made for both. I think he's one of those fringe
Yeah,
players. I think a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
voters are going to
yeah,
have him in or out. He's going to be split as
yeah, yeah,
far
yeah,
as the
100%.
votes. So I think it's fair either way. But either
And
way, I
he's
mean,
done
he's got a
himself a
great
couple
game.
favors too. It really helps when
Yeah.
you're shooting. He's legitimately shooting 50% on field goals, just field goal percentage in general,
Hmm.
46% from three, and 87% from the line since the All Star break. So this is someone who's peaking at the right time.
and, and, and,
He's
and
if
yeah,
recency bias matters to voters, man, Paul
this
George
is
is
a great
making a
stretch.
case for himself.
This is a great stretch. And even though
Yeah,
like Paul George, this isn't the most dominant or complete as far as like offensive production version of Paul George we've ever
yeah, yeah,
seen.
yeah.
This is probably the most efficient version, and it's the best version for his stage in his career, so he doesn't burn out, he doesn't get worn down, and the
Exactly.
Clippers are going to be better when he is in this role. It like optimizes his strengths the best. So I think we put all that together. He's a great
He's
candidate.
optimizing the team.
It is absolutely. So I'm going to throw another name here. We talked about this name here just before we went on.
Okay.
Tyrese Halliburton
Uh,
was tough, man. This is probably the name. This and probably one more. I struggle with the most
uh,
on this team. Let me bring up the numbers for his first 32 games. First 32 games up until January 6th, he was averaging 24 and 12 assists for those first 32 games. And I believe he was shooting over 40% as well. So
yes.
you just look at what he was doing as far as a scorer, a facilitator, a dead-eye shooter. The point guard moniker is something that is a very rare, and other than a few players probably in NBA history, you don't really associate that term with anybody. Like
Nash, Stockton, Chris Paul.
Nash, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Halliburton, I mean, he's still
Next in
doing it.
line.
His assists haven't really dropped off. But those first 32 games, like man, I mean, he was blending the what makes the modern NBA so great as far as like just being a scorer, like the pull up threes, the long threes, like the ability to get into the lane, finish effectively. Like the pace, the tempo was second
Yep.
to none. It was sky high all the way through the play-in tournament. I couldn't believe how fast they were playing. I mean, it was like you're just doing this trying to keep up with the pace of play. So that was
It makes me
incredible.
want to run, man. You're watching at home,
Exactly.
you want to run in place.
Track meet. So I mean that was awesome to watch. And then of course he hurts his hamstring and that slows him
Yeah.
down. And you see his 3-point percentage slide. So now today you look at his numbers. He's only averaging 20 now. He's only at 30. I mean, only 36%. That's low for him, but that's still a solid percentage. And then 11 assists. The assists haven't really moved. But the first 32 game stretch for him, which for him is basically half his games, it was that good. Like he was in conversation for, I mean, he was in that first, second team range through
There were
32
people
games.
talking about him in the MVP conversation.
He was
I
in
know it's
MVP
been a
conversation.
while, but that was a
Yeah,
real thing humans were saying.
it was. So that stretch for him, even though he's slid the last 30 games or so,
Yeah.
I think he did enough, just enough for him to maintain that position on third team. Okay, yeah, he slid from first, second down to third, but I mean, he's still having a solid season. The last 30 games, there's been some rough outings, but he still had some flashes of his old self along the way. And we have to remember hamstring injury, that's probably one of the worst in-season injuries you can have because it's something that if it's bad enough, you don't really shake it at all. Like
Yeah.
it completely. It lingers. You're never going to be 100%. He sat out a lot of games. He came back too early. He had to sit out again. He was trying to maintain his eligibility for an award. It's cool that he's still eligible. He still got to
Yes.
65 games. That's definitely a plus. Uh, but I mean that's tough. They suffered that injury because I think if it wasn't for that, the Pacers would have a few more wins. They'd be higher in the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference, and Halliburton would still be in around the MVP conversation. He would still be in the
Maybe.
probably
Maybe.
second team.
Yeah.
He'd probably be a second team All NBA if that hadn't
Yeah.
happened. So want to throw that out there and just mention that I think he's still having a sensational season, even though he had a really unfortunate injury that I think just sapped him of some of that effectiveness, especially from three. I think that's where he's had his biggest drop off.
I just want to remind people just how great the start of his season was, not just as a reminder of why we're putting him on this team, but also to kind of give fans something to look forward to next year because hopefully he won't get injured again and he'll kind of be able to bring it back. Um, Up until January 5th of this year, he was averaging 24.4 points per game, 12.8 assists per game with only 2.5 turnovers, right? And that doesn't always mean something, but if you're averaging over 5 assists per turnover, I think that's pretty great typically. Even though I feel like sometimes assist to turnover is a little overrated, but even when you watch him play, like he's the ball is zipping around when he has it in his hands. He's the reason their pace is the way it is. He was great at being able to find people at the rim. And then his scoring itself, right? He was legitimately 50, 40, 86 at the time. So it's an efficient scorer. He was driving to the hoop with ease, right? And he was being able to find all these spacers all kicked out. He was able to kick out the spacers everywhere. And because he's such a good passer as well, when he kicks it out from a drive, his passes tend to be more valuable than anybody else's because he's so good at being able to slingshot it from one side to the other. He can hit the skip pass with a no look, a jump pass. Like he has a lot of different varieties of distribution, which make his scoring even more valuable because his scoring blends so well with his passing. And that's kind of where we were. Then he played Boston. The first game was tough for him. They were kind of exploiting him as well on defense because the defense is still very suspect to me. Then he got hurt, and since then it's been a completely different player. And that's what makes this so tough because his defense was already bad. And I think after the injury, he's been someone who they've basically had to protect. And I still think his defense has been really poor. Of all the people in consideration for me, for all NBA, I think over the course of the season, I think his defense might be singularly the worst. But then again, I go back to, okay, what do I do here? If I look at his cumulative season as a whole, the stats still look great. And so I also ended up putting him. I think I'll make the choice right now in the moment to keep him on my third team. I had him originally too, but as we're talking this through, I think I'll still keep him on my third team just because of what he still offers as a playmaker, even right now in a semi-compromised state, and without Buddy Hield, who was one of his favorite connections on the team. I still think he offers enough as a playmaker, and he's doing enough for me. Still, like the bare minimum as a scorer, where I feel like cumulatively, if I consider his whole season, he should probably still be here.
No, that makes sense. No, for sure. Just overall, the impact he's had on the Pacers is incredible, and I think he deserves to be rewarded for that. Two other names I'll throw out really quickly. We already discussed them, but I had them on third team: Kawhi and
Okay.
Curry, third team.
Okay.
So those are two more. And I had to put Sabonis on here. I think that
Okay.
numbers, his impact for the Kings, just he's rising the ranks to triple doubles all time. He just broke the record for consecutive double doubles, breaking Kevin Love's record from
Wait a minute.
2010-11, I believe.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he's at now, but he broke the record that was at 54 consecutive double doubles.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's making history, I think warrants at least strong consideration for all NBA. Just the fact that you can do that on that level to where you're doing things on the basketball court as far as like numbers that at least for that position, only Jokic is doing as
Okay.
far as the double double, the triple doubles. Still uh, shooting a great percentage, still being super effective in the post. I mean, that is just crazy. 19, 13, and 8 are his averages on the season. So I think for those reasons, just the fact that he's been able to be a dominant at times post presence for them, a steadying hand for the Kings where they've had injuries. Malik Monk is out for the season, and you look at some of the other issues they've dealt with. They haven't been quite as effective this season, but again, it's he always shows up. He's always going to have an impact on the game. He doesn't disappear. He almost never gets injured. He's just always that rock steady guy that, I mean, he's leading the league in rebounds per game, I believe. So when you add in all that together, league leader in a major stat, making history, stacking triple doubles, just all that together, I think gave him enough of a case in my eyes to put him on that third team. Um, if Embiid was playing, if Embiid played enough games, I mean, he might get kicked off. If Embiid was in the mix, but since he's not, I think I keep him around, and I think he's done enough. This fifth player for me, this might have been the toughest one. It was between him and Halliburton was the toughest choice to make. I mean, I was between several players here. I was between Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Zion, and I landed on Zion to make my final choice. Now the first, it's kind of like the inverse of Halliburton. Halliburton started incredible and had the injury and slid. Zion started really shaky, especially in the in-season tournament where they played the Lakers and going to absolutely blast off the floor. He looked awful. The conditioning questions came up again. Is he overweight? Does he care about basketball? The motor wasn't there. And then he just flipped the switch in the second half of the season for the Pelicans, especially when Brandon Ingram went down with an injury. You started to see that physically dominant version of Zion again, to where he's consistently in the paint. His rim number is sky high. He's just making life so difficult for the defense. He's still at times a facilitator, a playmaker for the team. 5 rebounds, 5 assists for the season per game. Not the biggest score, 22 points per game, but I mean, still pretty solid. I just look at what his impact has been for the Pelicans in the second half, and
Yeah.
the fact that he's been able to kind of keep them afloat, even though they lost Brandon Ingram, which was a huge blow to them. They miss him incredibly bad right now, and that old Zion is back. I mean, that old Zion was an all-star. That old Zion was all NBA.
Yeah.
He was in that conversation. So I think the fact that he's been able to at least gain like 90, just about 100% of that old form back, where he's finishing the lobs, he's running the fast breaks himself. He can be a point guard at times, first team, just make plays for others. I was enough for me to elevate him just above other players in this list. Honorable mentions. I mean, there's a lot of them. I mentioned them before. Even Jaylen Brown got a little bit of consideration for me,
Yeah.
but in the end, old Zion was back, and I was like, I think that's enough for me to put him on that third team.
So go through your 5 again, because just
Yeah. So Curry, Kawhi, Tyrese, Zion, and Sabonis are my 5 for a third team All NBA.
This is fascinating.
Extremely difficult. I was almost at.
You didn't have Anthony Edwards, huh?
I was almost at Ant-Man. I was almost.
That was the one that surprised me earlier. That was why I was like, "Oh my god, did he?" Wow. Okay, not Anthony Edwards. That's the one that surprised me.
Yeah, I looked at the number. I mean, the numbers are great. He's had explosive games. He's still a very solid defender.
Yeah,
man, it was so tough, man. Like I just think one more season, just one more year, some slight refinement. He's still a little erratic to me sometimes, to where, like, because like I said before, I value guys that, like, you just know every single night what you're gonna get from him.
I got you. I know what you mean.
There's still a few nights to where it's like I don't know, like
there's some volatility to his game because of the way his shot making works. His shot is not as pure, like, as a shooter, like the way mechanics of his shot, not even shot selection. Sometimes that's questionable, but really the mechanics of his shooting are a little bit more. It's not as fluid as Tatum or Kevin Durant shot. There's a little bit more like the hitch when he's going upwards. So
and that's why his percentage is, like, it's a little bit lower.
It's also a little bit flatter of a shot.
37. Yeah, he sticks around 35 to 36, which I'm like, it's okay, but if you want to really be one of the best in the league, I mean, you look at SGA and Luka and you guys like that, they're at least at 38%. So if he can slide up just a little bit more, be a little bit more consistent, I mean, I think there's still some parts of his game that he needs to tap into for him to be absolute tier 1 for me. So I think I'm still wanting for a little bit more, but even with those nitpicks, he's still an incredible player, and he just missed the cut for me, just barely.
Okay. This has made my choice supremely difficult for me now. Okay.
Oh boy.
Oh man. All right, you might have to talk me through this. Okay. All right. So my first team and second team we already mentioned. Third team we already had Paul George, and so that means for me I had, and I guess I also said I put Halliburton on there. So there were 3 spots for me left, and there was a lot of names I was considering. Sabonis and Zion, I actually kind of like, they were my honorable mentions to my honorable mentions, if that makes sense. Like, they were still there within the picture where I'm looking at them like, oh, these guys, the season they've had offensively, especially Zion as he's picked up, and Sabonis all year, but especially with the rebounding, the double-double thing to me is just crazy. Like, the fact that he's so consistently been able to be a force on the glass for a team that desperately needs it. I know there's often times where I sound like I'm down on Sabonis, and it is just because of his defense, because offensively, he is a big, you can run almost everything through. He's like Jokic light in a way where he can't really shoot like that, but he can't kind of score from outside, but other than that, he brings you almost everything. His handoff game, I think, is probably second only to Jokic. Um, his passing, he can't make the sort of flashy passes, and he's not as good, I think, at being able to find people at the rim. But he's not bad at that either. Like he is pretty good at finding cutters and finding if someone has abandoned someone standing in the dunker spot momentarily. Like he is good at that sort of thing. So yeah, oh man, this is really tough for me. There's 3 spots left, and I still haven't even said Brunson's name or Edwards' name. Oh my
Oh
god.
no, I forgot
Oh
you didn't mention
no.
Brunson.
Oh man, this is really tough for me. And the thing was, okay, we're going to talk about the Bucks later, so hopefully we have enough time for that. How did you feel watching Lillard and then Brunson?
Lillard, I mean, I mentioned this to you before we came on the pod today, but Lillard has left me underwhelmed at points during the season. I don't see the same level of shot making that I'm accustomed to seeing from him. I think he can still get to the rim at a decent rate. He's not really finishing the way he used to, at least for what I've kind of been able to tell in the games I've watched.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have some numbers on him. Actually, I'll save that. I'll save that. We're going to get to the Bucks
Okay,
in a
yeah,
minute.
save it.
But yeah, just some numbers are down for him. Actually, a lot of numbers are down for him. So I don't see that same level of shot making. I don't see that. I mean, he's always been a pretty high turnover guy, but it just seems like I double checked it on Basketball Reference, and like
Mm-hmm.
there isn't really any big difference from his turnovers. It just feels like man, he's just turned the ball over so much. Like it seems like every game I watch, it's 4, it's 6, it's
That
5,
Bucks
it's
rubbing off
7.
on you.
Yeah, what's rubbing off
It's
on me?
the Bucks influence rubbing off on you when you watch it.
I
Every
guess
time they
so.
make a mistake, it all blends in. You know, his
Yeah,
turnover, someone else's turnover, it all blends in as a viewing experience. This is why it
yeah.
was tough for me. I felt the same way almost viewing Lillard, but then I thought about it. Okay, as a shot creator from distance, I think he's still better at doing that than Brunson is. The offense, part of the problem was, especially in the first half of the year, and this is part of why Adrian Griffin got canned in the manner he did, was because he was trying to, I think, run too much of an egalitarian offense when he had Giannis and Lillard. So it was limiting their touches and it was limiting their ability to kind of lean into what they do best. Now, Doc has kind of let them go wild with that, and the results haven't necessarily improved. So, but that I think we'll touch on that later. I think that's more of a systematic issue with the Bucks right now. But I struggled so much because as I'm watching Lillard and Brunson, I don't think Brunson is a great finisher at the rim either, partially because of his height. I think he gets more opportunities, especially once Randall got hurt, to kind of pound the ball into the ground. As a passer, both him and Lillard leave me wanting. Defensively, I thought Lillard and him were having a similar season. Like there were more similarities between the two of them than I would have cared to think. And the
Hmm.
biggest difference seemed to me one was kind of optimizing a player, and one was kind of taking away from a player. So I was thinking about role as well. So those two made it really tough for me. And then of course, see, I didn't even mention Anthony Davis yet either. He was
Oh
another
yeah,
person I'm considering for third team as well, and you already had him
yeah,
in, and you almost
mhm,
had him first team.
yeah.
And then there's one last name I just want to mention here. There's just one last name in consideration. I think as I talk this through, I'll pick my last 3 spots. I might even kick out Halliburton when this is all said and done because this is really difficult for me. Wembenyama. I think the second half of the season, the way he's been playing defensively, I mean, he might just be DPOY in year one. I know voters probably won't give it to him, and I know based off of the way voters vote, if you made me vote, I think I would probably give it to Anthony Davis. But if you were just
Yeah.
asking me straight up, like as a who is the biggest menace on the court, it's Wemby. Like his shot blocking range, just because of how long his limbs are and how aware he is in passing lanes. Like Chet is long too, but the more I've been watching Chet and Wemby, the more I'm appreciating just how much quicker and more aware laterally Wemby is at times at being able to snuff out threats. And he's reached a point now where, partially because of personnel, because everyone knows, hey, why do I bother taking a shot at Wemby when I can just, I don't know, attack Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Malachi Branham, all these other names they have. But his shot blocking radius is larger than any humans I've ever seen. It
Mhm.
almost extends to the short mid range, which is crazy to me. Like
Yeah.
there's times he'll just block shots at the edge of the paint from the elbows, which is
Mhm.
Defensively,
Great.
he's so absurd that I had to think about it. And then I started digging deeper. I was looking at the person who alerted me to this was I was looking at how Jeremy Sohan was playing and his pre and post Trey Jones starter splits were very interesting. So I started looking at those for Wemby as well. And he was far more efficient once Trey Jones entered the starting lineup. And I think some of it was his own growth because he grew more as a playmaker. I think over the second half of the season, there were fewer of those turnovers that I was finding in the first half when we were talking about rookies, where I was talking about sometimes he would dribble and just kind of lose his handle. There were fewer of those errors, and there was more of a comfortability playing within the offense. But then I think the other thing was sticking Trey Jones in the lineup means when I'm watching Wemby in the second half of the year, his true shooting percentage is up and his finishing is up. But I think part of that is because he now has a point guard who can find him on all those easy dump offs that he was creating. Like he's so
Mhm.
active off ball, the way he moves around and he's always reposting until someone finds him. In the first half, it felt like more of those were kind of going unfulfilled. And then as soon as they put Trey Jones in, it looks different. So now I have to think about, okay, of anybody I'm considering at all for all NBA, honestly, you can make a case that for almost anybody in the league outside of the Pistons, there is maybe no supporting cast that's been harder to watch than what he has going for him with the Spurs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. On instinct, I want to put him in on third team, but I don't know. I don't know what to do. Oh my god. Talking through it, I thought would help. It's not helping. I didn't even mention
It's
Jalen Brown either. I think he's having a great year. I think this is the best
been
year
great. Yeah.
he's had all year.
Yeah.
Oh no, man! What do I do?
Yeah. Why
What
don't
do
you
I
just
do?
throw
What
out
do
a
I do?
five? Because I do want to get to the Bucks.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
as hard as it is to do, I know.
You know what? You know what? Fine. I'll keep on Brunson. I'll keep Wemby. I'll keep AD, and I think I'll remove Halliburton, Lillard, Jalen Brown, Sabonis, and Zion. I think those
Okay.
five will have to be my honorable five. I think that's
That's
what I'm going to do.
fair enough. Fair enough. It's a tough choice to make, man, but they've
Yeah.
all been
I'm
great.
sorry. I'm sorry, Halliburton, and I'm sorry, Halliburton, especially because of how great your first half was. But I, I think I might reward people who are peaking at the right time now. So
That's fair. Fair enough, man. So for somebody, a team that is definitely not peaking at the right time, they're crashing and burning at the worst time. That is going to be the Milwaukee
oh
Bucks,
man.
and we're going to end the pod on this note. I'm sorry it's a little bit of a sadder note, but we wanted to kind of take a look at them and what they've been struggling with here so far. So tonight, like I mentioned before, they're currently playing the Knicks. So these numbers will be slightly adjusted by the time you guys see this podcast. But as of today, they're 47 and 30, second in the Eastern Conference. Let's see, Cleveland lost today, so game and a half ahead of the Cavaliers. 30 and 13 was the record under Adrian Griffin. They are
Yeah.
one game under 500 with Doc Rivers. 15 and 16 is the record ever since they made that coaching change. The last three games, disaster. They've lost three straight games, 4 out of 5. To
Oh
put them at
no.
47 and 30. They lost by 4 to the Wizards, the Washington Wizards, that are currently 2 games better than the Pistons for the worst record in the NBA. They lost by 10 to the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies are 13th in the Western Conference, 5.5 games above Portland and 7 games above the San Antonio Spurs. They lost by 6 in a clutch game. They absolutely should have won to the Toronto Raptors, who just had a 15-game losing streak going into that game, and they stepped against the Bucks. So hopefully that's the last of their lottery troubles. Luckily, they're not playing a lottery team tonight. Maybe they lose another game. But that's the story of the Bucks here over the past week or two. Now, their numbers, as far as their rating numbers, efficiency numbers, this has been the case all season.
Oh,
Very solid offense, fifth in offense. That's been great with Dame there, with Middleton when he's playing, and when he's on with Giannis, with Portis. They have the firepower, 100% of the firepower. The problem has been they can't get any stops. When they swapped out Holiday, and they brought in Malik Beasley, and now they're giving him more minutes. They're giving him a lot of minutes. Pat Connaughton, Dame. Perimeter defense is just all over the place. 18th in defensive rating as of today. They were fourth last season. That's a huge plunge to make, especially for a title contender. Not what you want to see. Now, their clutch. I did some digging on this one. Their clutch numbers over the past 5 games.
Okay.
This is rough.
Oh no.
26th in clutch net rating over the past 5 games. It actually only counts for 4 because they only had 4 clutch games. So per NBA.com, minus 48.4 in those 4 clutch games that they lost. 15th in defensive shooting efficiency. So this is just going back to their defense in general. 15th, 63.5% per ducks and threes. Last season, they were 6th in defensive shooting efficiency. They were 61% last season. This season, it's risen to 63.5, 2.4% increase in efficiency. And as we know with defense, higher is worse. You don't want opponents shooting a higher percentage. So I have some numbers for Dame and a few for Giannis, but what are your thoughts there on the overarching numbers here, Avi, for the fading Milwaukee Bucks?
Just disappointment, man. It's just so disappointing to watch something fall apart the way it has. And I mean, it was predictable. My antennas went up when I was like, hey, they're starting Malik Beasley. Wait, what's going on? Why is a Malik Beasley Damian Lillard backcourt happening in the year 2024? Something seems wrong here. I can feel it. But it's been worse than I could have ever imagined. Like as good as the Celtics are, uh, if anybody is thinking about it, if you go and look at the All NBA teams we just did, there's like 10 or 11 players coming from the West, and maybe only like 3 or 4 or 5 coming from the East. Part of that was because of injury, and part of that is because the East is weaker. And even if I look at a team like the Celtics, they've been folding a lot in the clutch, and I actually had some numbers we'll probably get to at some other episode about just how bad their offense overall is at times in the clutch, and part of that is because Tatum and Brown sometimes struggle with decision making in the clutch. That's why they've blown so many leads, like the Hawks games especially. So the conference is ripe and set up for for the Bucks to be able to capitalize on the fact that they made the Lillard trade, and they now have this theoretical two-headed monster with Middleton back and rounding into form technically, and having this older roster that maybe should have more experience. You would think hopefully that they'd be able to find some answers. And then you watch them play, and especially now that I'm watching them play with Doc Rivers, I expected to be, I think, more annoyed or perturbed with Doc Rivers than I ended up being. And in a way, that in itself is terrifying. Like if it was something like, oh, okay, I'm watching this and I don't know why Doc is doing this, and this is very much a problem to me, and this is probably why they're losing. That to me feels less concerning because then I'm like, okay, by the time they get into the playoffs, these players are experienced, and who knows, the playoffs force you to tinker, whether you want to or not. In almost every case, you're forced to adjust. So maybe there's some changes they could make that would help the team. But man, I don't know. I'm not really seeing anything. Like defensively, I don't know what they can do. When you have Brook, especially at the age he is now, all you can really try is a deep drop. He doesn't have the mobility, the flexibility, or the speed to be able to cover distance like that. So I don't even feel comfortable having him hedge because I don't think he can get back.
Yeah,
So
I
you
don't
have to
either.
play him in a deep drop, and he really is your only rim protector. So now
Mm-hmm.
you start running into problems. Okay, great. We know we want Brook to play deep drop, and he's still great at shot blocking. Okay, we have something there, right? Theoretically. Well, okay. Well, who are the guys fighting over screens? Older Pat Connaughton, eh, Malik Beasley, ooh,
Mm,
Dame, uh, older
yikes.
Chris Middleton. Like it's just Jay Crowder. I mean, I'm just going up and down the line. It's I
Jay
don't know what
Crowder,
they can
man.
do
That's rough.
defensively, and it's really really hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like Morat, even the thing that's I think the most problematic thing when Doc Rivers got back on transition defense, they were fighting much more. By the end of Adrian Griffin's tenure, part of the reason he was fired is not just that he wasn't amplifying his two best players or letting them cook with the rock in their hands. It was the fact that defensively, it seemed like they had lost all trust in each other and they had lost morale. They had stopped running back in transition as much as they used to in years past, which is kind of why their defense used to be so good because they were such a transition-oriented team. We'll have Giannis sprinting up the floor, and defensively, we always get back. So it's just like in the regular season, they always got like an extra 4 points per game on their point differential just based off of going back on defense and running with Giannis. They were losing that edge this season because they weren't running back. So when Doc Rivers came back, for the first month or so, they started running back on transition. When you start watching the last, I want to say last 2 weeks, really, you see a team that's sluggish again. It's slow. The morale seems low. When something goes wrong offensively, they're not getting back. They're not bickering, but you see a team that's they're not even running back casually. It's like head down, kind of in your just thinking about, oh my god, we messed up that possession. What are we doing? And so it, and then once they mess up defensively, offensively, it feels like they're kind of just letting Giannis and Dame cook. There's not as many set plays as I would like, and some of that is just because of the way they play, and some of it is also personnel. Like when I look at other teams, the way the Thunder maximize Chet, or the way Utah maximizes Lauri Markkanen and some of their other guards, right? You're setting up all these screening actions and stuff because you have these players who can kind of space out from the perimeter, and if you close out too hard, okay, now they can drive in. The
Mm-hmm.
Bucks are bottom 5 in the league in drives per game because they don't have the personnel to do it outside of Giannis or Dame.
Right.
Middleton at this stage of his career is a good, not even, yeah, he's an above average shot creator, but defensively he's so cooked, I think, to the point you don't want to play him a whole bunch of minutes, and you're still kind of monitoring him to make sure he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Portis defensively, I mean, I don't think he's having a great year anyways. Malik Beasley's 3-point shot fell off after the All-Star break, and that's been dreadful for their offense.
Oh,
Jay Crowder, I mean, Coach Nick keeps talking about Jay Crowder not being able to attack drives, and I mean, he's not wrong. He's not
he
wrong.
like
Jay Crowder's not doing
never
anything.
drives.
They
He
got so
never drives.
desperate. They are so desperate right now. If you go to Bucks Reddit or Bucks Twitter, they are begging you to put Andre Jackson Jr. on the court.
I mean, what other choice
That's
do you
where it's
have?
at.
You got to
And
try
they're
it.
not wrong. That's the crazy thing. They're not wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
this team is now dependent on Andre Jackson Jr. because he provides a spark as a perimeter defender. And he is so limited offensively, but nobody cares because when you watch them defensively, it's a train wreck.
It is. It is. They have to
They
get
can
back on
lose to
track.
anybody, and because they have those two excellent players, they can beat anybody.
Right. And I think for if they want to make even any kind of noise in the playoffs, because when it comes down to it, you want your best players to be if your best players are performing at their peak levels, it at least gives you a chance in a 7-game series. And this brings me to the Dame numbers, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I mean his efficiency is just down everywhere. So you got the 8 points per game less than last season. Okay, some of that can be explained. His usage is lower. He's playing with Giannis. It's going to be different. Okay, you're playing with Middleton. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's fine. But I don't like the 5% drop in effective field goal percentage from 56 to 51. I don't like the 7% drop in corner 3-point percentage from 37 to 30. I don't like the 11% drop from mid range from 49 to 38. And we know that when you get to the playoffs, you're going to need to hit shots in between range. Teams are scheming for you. Hey, get over the top of screens when Dame is coming off the screens. Cut him off at the rim. Make sure he's not getting using that first step to beat you and get to the rim. Force him to be an in-between player. If he's going to shoot 38% in between, I don't like their chances in a 7-game series because they like you just mentioned, they don't have multiple players. They're not the Celtics. It's not like, okay, we can go to Derek White. We can go to Porzingis. We could go to Jaylen Brown. Like there's options on that team. The Bucks are very top heavy right now. They don't have a lot of offensive options once you get past the top 2 or 3 players. And a big reason for that is because of the lack of rim pressure. So, I mean, if Dave is not going to be on his P's and Q's, be 100%, I mean, honestly, you're looking at the East here. Who might they play in the playoffs right now? You have the Heat, you have the Sixers. God forbid they
Oh
play
my
the
god,
Sixers because I don't think they'd win that series.
they're not.
Honestly,
I don't think they will either.
no. That's a worst case scenario for them. If you're playing Embiid and you have Maxey, you have Tobias Harris, they will surrender a crap ton of points. So many ball, like they're not going to be able to keep pace with a fully healthy version of the Sixers. And even if they play Miami, I'm not even sure about their chances against the Heat either. We saw what happened last season. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we're in agreement. They're worse than last season as a unit, Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't like where they're going right now, and I'm very low on their chances of even making the conference finals. I just don't see it.
Offensively, when you're watching them, what does anything stand out to you? That that
In
that's that's kind of what I
in a
see.
negative way or a positive way,
Just in any
or
way,
either.
it's just bland.
It is bland.
It's not even basic. It's just bland.
Yeah, just pick and
Yeah,
rolls for Dame,
yeah.
the rim run for Giannis, the spot ups for Pat Connaughton and Malik. Malik can take a 1-2 dribble, pull up into a three. And I mean, Brook is Brook. He takes the spot up threes, his long balls, and then that's kind of it.
See, and that's the thing. If they were running a basic offense, right? I actually think even that would be better because if they were just doing basic pick and roll all the time, and Giannis was committed to being a permanent roller, then okay, maybe there's something there. If you felt like you had the personnel, like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, Brooke, but um we can't have you on the court as much anymore. Defensively, we're just gonna have to try Giannis as a big and have him be four out one in spacing with Giannis being the roll man, and Giannis was committed to it, and we had the personnel. Okay, maybe you could try something there, but they don't have anything like that. They don't have anything. Defenders don't feel any fear at all when they're sagging off of most of the players out on the perimeter, other than maybe Malik Beasley. And again, he's been ice cold. So, and when I watch Giannis, I don't see someone committed even now. Like there'll be stretches where I'm seeing him and Dame do some pick and rolls, and then you watch, it'll just disappear. The game against the Raptors, for example, on watching the film, I don't really remember that many um pick and roll possessions at all where Dame and Giannis were kind of interacting with one another. And even when I do see it, when Giannis is setting a screen, he doesn't really roll. He just kind of stands there for a second, like, "Hey, yo, pass me the ball," and then kind of collects himself back out on the perimeter, and then tries to restart a drive from there. So it's almost like he restarted in isolation. They don't really gain anything from the pick and roll. And I think the scariest stat here is the way the Heat were able to cook the Bucks perimeter defense last year, right? Because of the screen navigation problems they had, and the fact that because they play such a deep drop, it kind of opens it up for a team like Miami with shooters to score on. Other than Indiana, no play-in or playoff team is worse against pick and roll ball handlers than the Bucks are right now in terms of efficiency scoring, and that
Hmm.
is terrifying.
That's not good news for them. It doesn't bode well for their chances because it's a fatal flaw. Like if you're a playoff team and you have a flaw that massive that
Yeah,
teams are taking advantage, that lottery teams can take advantage of it, you stand no chance in the playoffs because you're just going to get picked on in that area over and over again. And like you said, they don't have any counters. Like if you're relying on a
they had one counter.
Andre Jackson or something
They
like
had
that
one
to put
counter.
it up.
It was Patrick Beverly. That was their one
Yeah,
counter. But right now he's hurt with a right ankle, and he hurt his wrist so bad, his right wrist so bad, he's probably going to need surgery in the
surgery.
offseason. So
Yeah,
he's so compromised offensively. When
yeah,
Patrick Beverly joined the team initially, like that first game, I was like, oh my god, we're it's a whole new Bucks. It's a whole new world. And first of all, it's terrifying when Patrick Beverly is their savior, but he really was their savior. But now that he's so compromised, I think offensively, because I think with that wrist, I don't think teams will be afraid of a shot, and I don't think he'll
he's
be
not
able to
able to
make
shoot
a
at
pay.
all.
And
Yeah,
then with the ankle injury, he's not coming back today. I don't know when he'll be back. And by the time they reach the playoffs, I don't know how healthy his ankle will necessarily be.
yeah,
So if he's
that's dicey.
compromised laterally and he's trying to go around screens, and he's a small guy anyways, so people could shoot
Yeah,
over him.
that's true. That's
They don't
that's what I
really
was
have
about to
answers.
say. His size is a
Yeah,
limiting factor. So he's only 6'1", 2. Even though he plays hard and he's probably a better defender, they're one of their probably their best.
he is their best
One of their
defender, man. It's just they don't have
yeah.
anybody else to compete with him.
No, no. I mean, if we're not talking about Giannis, then I mean he's the next best bet. You don't want him to be one of your best bets. an older
Yeah.
Patrick Beverley. So that just kind of speaks to where they're at. So that's the Bucks situation. Hopefully this is rock bottom for them and they can collect a few more wins. But regardless, I don't see a long playoff run for them. I think there's just too many holes on defense, and I think on offense they're too reliant on. Obviously, Giannis and Dame is a great duo to go with, but I just with Dame, I have questions about Dame, even his offense. So that's just a sad story for them. So
One last note, because I know we're leaving it on a somber note, but I just wanted to make one last point. I don't know if it needs to be a somber note. If we think about super teams, I think the Kevin Durant and like Steph Curry Warriors, I think they kind of threw off what super teams typically end up being. Or like even if you look at like the KG Celtics, right? I think those guys overinflated how super teams tend to go. I think what we're seeing is the pitfalls of a super team in year one. You got Lillard, but you didn't have enough. Like the way you built your roster because you wanted to bring Brook back because you didn't really feel like you had any alternatives if you let him go, because you wanted to bring Middleton back and keep him because you didn't feel like you had any alternatives. In year one, once they got Lillard, their roster was kind of stuck. So in a
yeah,
way, I almost think you could compare this to what the Heat were in year one when they lost to the Mavs in the
first,
finals. That Heat
yeah,
team was obviously much better than what we're seeing out of this Bucks team, but they kind of had the same thing where their problem was different. They had so many bigs, but they didn't have enough wings who could complement um, LeBron and Wade well. And the way Wade and LeBron played at that time, their outside shot hadn't developed, and Chris Bosh was still working on his corner three, so spacing was
mm-hmm,
congested at all times. That's part
yeah,
of the reason why when LeBron went into the finals against Dirk and company, he just like folded like a lawn chair. There just wasn't much for them to do. The space had all closed in and congested on them. They had Jason Kidd at point of attack, Tyson Chandler back there, like so they had some good defenders personnel wise, and in a different way, that's kind of where the Bucks are right now. They have these two pillars, but none of their supporting cast at this stage of their career is set up to optimize them. So
mm-hmm,
I know that these two players are older, but your hope is, hey, maybe we let Doc Rivers go and get another coach. It's not like Doc Rivers has shown anything so far that makes you think we should keep him. I don't know
no,
what he's shown me so far for me to think I should fire him, but he hasn't shown anything that makes me think I should keep him either. Right? So
yeah,
maybe
exactly,
what the goal might be in the next two off seasons, I think, because I think Lillard might be able to sustain himself longer than you think, like the way Chris Paul and Steph have until age 36. I
yeah,
think 2 seasons from now might be when this roster, when the next great Bucks team is kind of formed. And at that point, as you're assembling the roster over the next 2 years, I think that's when you need to hire the coach who's going to maximize the roster you have. Like I think about the way Philly is now. Philly has Embiid and Maxi, and the smart move they did was hiring Nurse because
mm-hmm,
Nick Nurse did a great job with maximizing the give and go actions that
yeah,
Maxi and Embiid have,
it's
because
perfect,
that lets Embiid kind of play from higher up where he can survey the court a little bit better if he wants to kind of just take the ball and do something with it. It allows him to attack much more as a perimeter creator. And because he's such a good shooter now, that's actually an effective form of offense. You can kind of ISO him up top and score. And then with Maxi, the problem Maxi still has is if I'm asking Maxi to isolate, like it's just consistently, it's probably not going to go anywhere because he doesn't have the handle or the consistent mid range like shooting for him to be able to do something like that, which is why his efficiency numbers tend to fall off when he's by himself.
right,
But if he's playing off of Embiid, anytime he gets stuck, all right, check it to Embiid, run around fast, get ball, drive.
mm-hmm,
Right. So they have synergy and they have a coach who can maximize that. Right now, we have two players. Surrounding cast does not maximize them. I don't even know if the coach has the option to build a supporting cast with this personnel to maximize them. So you need to build a roster first and then determine, can Doc Rivers maximize it? My guess would be based off of his history. Maybe not. He seems like he's
I don't think
better
so.
at maximizing. He seems like he's a firefighter. He's good at maximizing when you have limited talent and getting into the playoffs. The Clippers, when CP3 left, like that sort of team, the early Magic teams he had. I
Yeah,
know he had the Celtics, but that's the exception. I think he's a better firefighter than he is like ceiling raiser. So he might not be the team for this personnel.
agreed,
So you got to
agreed,
get the personnel right and then get your coach of the future. Maybe everyone wants a Will Hardy type, but it's hard to find. But
it is,
that should be
yeah,
your hope. That should be your
for
hope.
sure, yeah. I'm not really high on their hopes of kind of
This year,
rebuilding
yeah,
the
no.
roster. because I mean that brings into quite that's a whole nother discussion about their cap situation, and
Yeah,
that's pretty screwed. So it is what it is.
I hope
But yeah, I mean it was
we can
worth
make
a
some
shot.
trades.
Yeah, just getting Lillard and giving it a shot. That's what you got to do as a front office. You got to swing sometimes. So, hated we had to end it there, but I hope everybody listening gain something from this conversation. Would love to hear your thoughts on all NBA. So, shoot us a message. Shoot us a comment, something like that. If you have some opinions on all NBA, if you have disagreements or whatever, love to hear your thoughts. But this was a great exercise. I loved getting to do awards every year. We can talk about All NBA, and we talked about Sixth Man before. Go check that out if you guys haven't already. Most Improved Player, we also did that one. We might do an All Rookie. These are always fun discussions to have, talking about the best players in our league. So I want to thank everybody again for checking out this episode of the pod. Hope you enjoyed it. And we're wrapping up as we get closer to the playoffs and the play-in tournament. We're just a week or two away from the big action coming up here in the NBA. So hope you guys will stay locked, stay tuned, check us out, because this playoff run is going to be a great time. So thanks everybody for giving us the time of your day. We hope to see you on the next installment of NTC. Until then, take care.